It should be going. Can you... can you all hear me? Yes, take two because computer problems. Uh, hello. This is the first time I'm streaming using Streamlabs, and so I have no idea how this is gonna look or anything. Yeah, I decided to try making it better um, by just getting rid of the camera. That tends to cause problems. Didn't last time I streamed, but or last time I streamed with the camera, there are no problems. I'm also no longer on Discord. Um, I was hoping to get some conversations with Coop, but that's not going to happen because all of my processing power is going towards Streamlabs right now in YouTube. Because in order to end a stream, you have to have both open, which is kind of dumb. I wish there was a way. There probably is, and I just don't know about it. Probably is a way to like auto set YouTube to end the stream if it's not receiving data for like 3 minutes. So let's share this around. Yeah, last time like it was as soon as I started like posting the link, my computer crashed, and that's not good. I need a new computer, which is hard when I make no money. It's really hard when the money I do make alongside my mom is barely enough to pay all the bills. Not to eBay or anything, but one of the reasons why I want to use Streamlabs is because it's a lot easier to get, you know, donations. When you donate through Streamlabs, I get a lot more of the donation than I do through YouTube Super Chat. But now to the meat and potatoes of this stream. This is my second writer's workshop stream. I think it was like a year ago I did this. I did a writer's workshop, um, just answering questions I get as someone who is on fanfiction and someone who is wanting to become a legit writer. And just talk about my creative process. I think that was about a year ago I did that. This one, a little more emotional. I have no idea what it's going to be like. Because, for those of you who don't know, which might be uh, both of you, there's only two people watching right now. I have a fanfiction account. I have a fanfiction series on Ruby called RWBYond. And I first started. Can't hear me. Testing. Can you hear me? Yeah, you should be able to hear me. No frames dropped. Uh, I take a lot of long pauses, especially when I'm getting something to drink. So maybe I just wasn't talking at the time. Anyway, I started, writing and releasing RWBYond in February of 2016, and we are at the end of May 2019. So that is over 3 years I dedicated to this one, fan fiction project, and it's over now. I wrote the last chapter. I uploaded it the other day. Actually, I think it was just yesterday. Might have been last night or yesterday morning. Um, Days all kind of run together. Yeah, chapter 100 of RWBYond Home, which was the final installment of the RWBYond fanfiction series, and kind of want to talk about it a little bit with you guys and talk about kind of what's next for me as both a writer and a YouTuber. So if you have any questions, put them in the chat. I'm keeping up with that. And once again, not to eBay, but any super chat or Streamlabs donations are most welcome. So RWBYond, I started getting ideas for it around Volume 2. Which I've gone on record as saying this numerous times. I was not a fan of Ruby during Volume 1. I got into it because of Volume 2. More specifically, the episode Burning the Candle, which is Volume 2, Episode 6. It's the episode where Yang and Blake have their, heart-to-heart talk. And then it's the first part of the dance with Ruby and Ozpin. And you also got the comedy bit with John and Rin and the towel. And Nora saying, practice what you preach, Pyrrha. All that stuff. And so I started coming up with ideas for, where the series could go from there. And I spent several months working on an outline, a 100-chapter outline that was going to pick up where Volume 3 leaves off. So I knew Volume 3 was going to come eventually. I didn't want to do a tournament arc. And so I kind of, set a goal for myself to start writing it as soon as Volume 3 ends. And that was going to be where RWBYond started. It wasn't called RWBYond at the time. I think on the doc it was just called Ruby Fanfiction. I didn't have a name for it at the time. I know the subtitle went through a couple iterations because I had an OC team that were very relevant in that first, storyline. And so it was Team Ruby and Team, they were called Marine at first, I think, and then Team America, and then Team Argent, and then finally, the final iteration was Team Irony. But the same basic, 4 characters, Rio Azul and August Gold, they didn't change at all. Rubrum changed the most, and Natalie Blanche changed only a little bit, from when I first conceived her character to starting to release RWBYond. And so that 100 chapter outline was going to end with the final battle being between Ruby and a character named Akagi, who was an assassin specifically trained to take down silver-eyed warriors, basically. So I knew that was going to be a thing. I don't remember the exact specifics of what she was and what Ruby was back then, because a lot of that changed with Volume 3. So Volume 3 happened, and a couple things went about what I expected. Beacon being under attack, Vale being under siege, Cinder launching her plan, basically. I knew that was going to happen during the tournament. What I didn't expect was Pyrrha to die so early, at the end of Volume 3. I didn't expect her to die that volume. I expected her to die eventually. I thought she was just going to, be in the show for a lot longer. I had this entire like storyline, mapped out for her in that 100 chapter outline that was going to end with her sacrificing herself to save Ruby and Jean. And because of Volume 3, I had to scrap that. I also had to scrap the use of Beacon as a setting for a while. Which is kind of where the title ended up coming from. Because I knew that everyone was going away from Vale, so they were going beyond Vale. And so the first, saga of RWBYond was called RWBYond Vale. And in the lead up to Volume 3, or Volume 3's ending, I also, started doing a kind of a prequel series called Stark Tales of the Old Huntsman that bounces back and forth between, the Great War era with Jean's great-grandfather and, Team Stark, their era, Summer Rose, Crow, Tyang, Raven, and their backstory. So that's Stark Tales of the Old Huntsman. I wrote RWBYond Vale and Stark Tales of the Old Huntsman, concurrently, every dozen or so chapters of RWBYond Vale, I would write a Stark Tales of the Old Huntsman chapter. And I was doing a chapter every single day for about a year. And in that first year, I blew through RWBYond Vale, which is 130 chapters, 5 arcs long. Stark Tales of the Old Huntsman, which is another 22. I did a Violet Rose. RWBYond War, which was the sequel. I did a bunch of a lot of side stories like RWBYond Destiny, RWBYond Sisters, RWBYond Happily Ever After, which was the epilogue series where we pick up how every single major character from RWBYond Vale is kind of coping with, this world without Ozpin or Salem. And then that ended up going into RWBYond Generations, which was the next big saga. So going back to RWBYond Vale and that 100 chapter outline, I ended up, because of Pyrrha's death and everything else that happened in Volume 3, I ended up cutting it in half. I ended up boiling down those 100 chapters into about 52 chapters. The first 2 arcs of RWBYond Vale. And then, as I was working on this outline, I also had the idea of a future story, that takes place years and years later, where Ruby is already a full-fledged huntress and a legendary warrior and gets targeted by, someone with a very personal grudge against her. And as part of that story, I was going to have a lot of flashbacks to this war with Salem and Ruby eventually defeating Salem. Now, those flashbacks ended up kind of taking a life of their own, especially when I conceived the characters of Necros, Faust, and Avarice. And so I decided to have those flashbacks be, flesh them out into their own arcs. So I had 3 more arcs, and I put those in RWBYond Vale, and then the future storyline with an older Ruby, that became RWBYond War, which was its own kind of one-off 26 chapter arc of a story that I did, right after I was done with RWBYond Vale. And RWBYond Vale, of course, ended with the defeat of Salem. RWBYond War picks up 5 years later. And then the next major saga after that was RWBYond Generations, which takes place 17 years after that, where Ruby's kids are starting to become huntsmen and huntresses and starting to go to school. And then from there, RWBYond Generations went 130 chapters, which is 5 arcs. And then after I was done with that, I wanted to do another story because I felt like RWBYond Generations just by design wasn't a very satisfactory ending because it was a good swan song for Team Ruby, but the actual next generations that's in that title didn't really get their time to shine and be the heroes. They were kind of in the background or supporting characters during those the really big battles. And so RWBYond Home started. In RWBYond Home, I originally conceived to go on indefinitely. It was just going to go on forever. It was going to focus on Prim. It was going to be like kind of Freak of the Week or Freak of the like 2 chapters. I took a lot of inspiration from Justice League and Batman the Animated Series with its story structure in those first 2 arcs. But then there came a point where I decided that RWBYond deserves a definitive ending, and I need to give it a definitive ending. Otherwise, I will not be able to move on to bigger, better things. And so then I took a bit of a hiatus. I actually used my time wisely with this. This was about a year ago, when I was forced on hiatus because of personal life stuff that was happening, and I actually took a lot of that time to outline an ending for RWBYond. I outlined 2 more arcs, which was the World's Strongest arc and the One World arc, the last 2 arcs of RWBYond Home. And so when I, got my computer back, was able to write again more frequently, I was able to finish up the Mistral arc in RWBYond Home, do the tournament arc, that was the World's Strongest arc, and then the final arc. And I was doing about a chapter a week on average. Uh, yeah, and so RWBYond Home went 100 chapters. Chapter 100 was uploaded the other day, and now I'm on to bigger, better things. Yeah. Uh, that's because, see, it was 100 chapters, got condensed into 50, and then I had another 70 chapters that got added on to it. 75? No, 80 chapters. Another 80 chapters that got added on to it. It was really the fault of 2 of the main villains that I came up with. Uh, One of them being Necros Faust, whose ability is basically like the Ito Tensei from Naruto. He's able to resurrect, you know, um, fallen champions from Remnant's history, and I did an entire arc of that. That was 26 chapters. And then King and the Grimm, the Grimoire, the leaders of the Grimm, sentient, Grimm with human level intelligence and more power than any Maiden, uh, became like kind of the next major antagonist that got kind of their own arc, along with Salem, who is also on that level. So I don't know where to get. I don't know where to begin with the deeper things. I could kind of give you plot details. I could do themes. I could do some character breakdowns. I'll leave that up to you. What do you want me to talk about now? I guess so. Because oh man, I forgot to do the math on this before I started. I know it went over a million words long in the end. Half of that was RWBYond Home. Uh, if I could go back and change one thing about RWBYond, particularly RWBYond Veil, it would be RWBYond Veil. I would change the first arc on that. I would give Weiss a lot more to do. Weiss and Blake kind of got sidelined throughout that story and throughout all the stories, really. Um, Blake became more relevant the less she was actually involved, because of her relationship with certain other characters. And Weiss, I feel like, always got put on the back burner, which is kind of sad because she's kind of my favorite character. I just didn't really know what to do with her. I didn't know what to do with her and her whole like family dynamic. So I'm gonna refer to some canon characters and how I went about doing those for this. His kitty wants to do character breakdowns, and so far she's the only one to give me an answer. Ruby gets the most to do. She is the main character. I do give her like absolute main character status. Like Weiss, Blake, Yang, and Jean are kind of like the B level characters. Um, or I guess A level, and Ruby would be S level. Uh, I really wanted to challenge Ruby's ideals in a meaningful way without being all like tongue in cheek, nihilistic. Uh, I like my good characters to just be good people, even if they make mistakes. They make them for like good reasons or understandable reasons, and strive to do better later on. And I think that's I think I did that with Ruby. Um, she gets challenged in a lot of different ways. There's this theme of rivalry that goes throughout all of this, where a rival character will push another character like further than they would have gone on their own. And Ruby has several rivals throughout um, RWBYond. First and foremost, Cinder. Cinder is the most, ever present of her rival characters, and the one she gets the most fights with, possibly. Maybe Levi. Hold on, let me kind of do a counter. Hold on, because volumes 1 through 3 are canon in RWBYond. So you got fight in volume 2. The brief encounter in volume 3 I'm gonna count because that was an inciting incident for a lot of stuff. Then Battle of Mistral, Battle at Beacon, Battle at Mount Serenade, where Cinder nearly killed her. That's 5. And then the final battle during the RWBYond Veil, that makes 6. And then the battle that they had in RWBYond Generations, that's 7. And Levi had his first real fight with Ruby where he nearly killed her, the final fight in RWBYond War, then I think the fight during the Flood arc, and then their final fight in RWBYond Generations. So they only had 4 big fights, whereas Ruby and Cinder had, we'll say, 5 major fights in RWBYond. So yeah, Cinder is the most ever present of Ruby's rivals throughout that series. And they both kind of want the same thing. I think that's a good hero-villain dynamic to have. They both want to make the world better, but they have very different ways to go about doing it. Where Ruby wants to inspire hope in people and smile and kind of like All Might in My Hero Academia. Cinder wants to dominate. She wants to purge the corrupt world and build an idealistic world in her image. And that's where the conflict comes in. And that's also where the respect comes in, because unlike a lot of Ruby's other villains, there is good in Cinder. Cinder does end up going through a face turn later on where she actually joins the Huntsmen and helps them against the Grimoire during RWBYond Home. And she kind of also helps them fight Avis Braun in RWBYond Generations, but she was kind of her own. She was kind of her own side of that conflict. Prince of Latveria asked. Prince of Latveria, this is a writer's workshop stream. I'm just talking about the 3-year-long fanfiction series I just ended, called RWBYond. And so I'm just talking about it. I'm going to talk about like other writing things I'm doing, and you know, maybe talk about go on some tangents about like what I look for in different genres. Uh, so yeah, during Ruby on Home, Cinder does end up becoming like just a straight up hero, and then sacrifices herself to take down one of the Harbingers, which are these big like mountain-sized Grimm that can destroy entire kingdoms if left unchecked. Weiss. Guess I should do Weiss next. Like I said earlier, Weiss doesn't get a whole lot to do. I kind of keep her as like just a supportive best friend for Ruby, and you know, resident dust mage, there to explain how dust and stuff works when I need some, you know, science talk, some tech talk. I usually had her be the one to do it. Um, One thing I did, and this was after Ruby on Veil, or kind of during Ruby on Veil, her father dies right in front of her eyes, and she's never able to get closure for it. Uh, she never like successfully gets um that level of closure that she, you know, probably deserves. Uh, and that kind of haunts her throughout the next few stories, and she kind of turns into an alcoholic and has some frugal relationships with various characters before, you know, kind of sobering up and raising her daughter and later son. She also had, I gave her 2 kids. Uh, yes, Coop, thanks for reminding me. There's a link to the Discord in the description. There's also a link to my Streamlabs where you can donate money to me to help me, like, maybe get a better computer that's worth a damn. Uh, yeah. Oh, Kitty, I'm not actually going to be on Discord while I'm streaming because I had issues earlier, and I'm trying to limit the amount of things I have open on my computer to the bare minimum. So no Discord conversations, as much as I would love to. Um, Coop is also working on a book, as am I. It's man, Coop's book is a trip. Uh, it's a rom com with a love triangle where the 2 girls are the embodiments of certain physical characteristics. Uh, like they're godlike beings, like the god of thighs and the god of clavicles, which I think is just hilarious. Hilarious in concept, at least. I'm actually several chapters behind uh, on Coop's project that he's doing. Um, I just don't read a lot. I don't read as much as I should. Uh, so next, I think is Blake. I don't do a whole lot with her in RWBYond Vale in RWBYond War, I'd probably do even less with her. Uh, she does have this like bit of a rivalry with Adam throughout RWBYond Vale, where she like slowly like gets to his level. Um, like the first couple times they fight, she ends up getting bailed out by much stronger characters like the headmaster of Shade Academy, or Raven, or August Gold, who's one of my OCs, who's a professional huntsman. Um, uh, and then certain events in RWBYond War kind of scare Blake, namely the rise of an organization called Cypher, who she discovers are trying to do something with the Faunus of Menagerie, and are responsible for her parents' disappearance. Uh, because I was working during RWBYond Vale and stuff, I was working under the assumption that Blake's parents were dead, and then they actually got introduced in the show during Volume 4, and I was in the middle of writing RWBYond War at the time, so I decided to have it to where she thinks her parents are dead, but really they just went missing, and they were kidnapped by Cypher, and put on an island. So she ends up rescuing them, has a couple clashes with Cypher, and starts to kind of uncover their plot, and gets obsessed with it, kind of the same way she got obsessed with Torchwick during Volume 2. And she doesn't take it alone. She partners up with Yang in all of this. But she does more or less neglect her husband and kid, which causes issues for their daughter, who you can see in the picture that I have up, which I guess is as good a time as any to get into that picture. That picture is a sketch drawn by Kitty Kirishima, and it is portraying Prim, Johnny, and Nova, 3 OCs of mine. Prim is the second daughter of RWBYond. Nova is the only daughter of Blake and Sun, and Johnny is just a dude who is also a really skilled huntsman and has a magic flashlight. So that's neat. They have a love triangle. Nova wins in the end, though, because Prim don't need no man, and Nova does. Nova needs to get ticked down. She needs to take a chill pill. Uh, God, I love her. I love all my characters, but there are some I love more than others, and Nova is probably my favorite. Uh, so yeah, Blake is a deadbeat parent throughout RWBYond Generations, and then she is forced to retire after a leg wound. Which brings us to Yang. Yang gets a lot to do in RWBYond Vale. A lot of it is because I really wanted to explore her relationship with Ruby, her relationship with Ruby, her relationship with Raven, and her past relationship with Summer. Oh, Kitty, yes, but, up until chapter 99, that was the case. Uh, good joke, though. You're forgiven for having not read the most recent chapter. Brum got fucked up. And so, oh, Yang. She's very protective and kind of arrogant, and uh, there's this, kind of arc she goes on where she starts getting jealous of Ruby because Ruby is able to defend herself, and Ruby kind of turns the tables on her, where like Yang is so used to being the one defending Ruby that she is not okay with Ruby being the one defending her, and that caused like anxieties and stuff, feeling like unnecessary, unneeded. This massive part of her identity being, uh, this massive part of her identity basically being stolen from her by Ruby's own talent. Uh, and the fact that Ruby is the Spring Maiden. Uh, and so, yeah. Coop wants me to tell you how Coop locked down Girl Ren. Okay, so Girl Ren is Nephrite. She is the oldest child of Nora and Ren, and she is basically female Ren. And in RWBYond Home, I needed a character to have been like a bad guy for the bad guys, who then joins up with the good guys to help fight the bad guys. And they were going to, and the heroes were going to meet him in a prison. And so I was bouncing around some names, and Coop was on voice with me, and he basically like, how about Coop, King of all bandits? And so Coop the Bandit King was born, and he basically has Trafalgar Law's powers from One Piece. And then at Coop's insistence, I partnered him up with Nephrite, uh, for purely professional reasons at first, and then in the epilogue, I decided to throw in a nod that Coop actually locked Nephrite down, and they're like together. All that because I needed a character who could like move things places. Uh, I guess I could go into Team Juniper next. So Jean gets a lot to do throughout RWBYond. He deals with his own family legacies and other issues. Getting over Pyrrha's death and starting a relationship with Ruby, and becoming a leader, like not just a team leader, but like a real important person within the Huntsman Alliance in those during the war arcs. Um, yeah, he I kind of did the Gohan thing with him, where he keeps on trying to retire, but then like keeps getting pulled back into the fight for one reason or another. Um, say Nora and Ren, I didn't do a whole lot with. I didn't really explore their backstory except for the fact that they are orphans. Uh, and I do feel like I did a good job at like their confession, like having them both basically up against the wall against an opponent who's completely outclassing them, having to work together, thinking that they're going to die, and in that moment, like actually being honest about their feelings for once. Uh, and then rounding out Team Juniper, I actually put Penny on the team as a replacement for Pyrrha. I thought it was fitting. Um, I think it's still fitting. Like I still think that like a Penny 2.0 would be a good fourth member for Team Juniper, because I refuse to call them Team Juniper unironically. Team Junior is a dumb name. Uh, and I just really wanted to explore the idea of synthetic humans. Uh, these kind of replacements that Ironwood wanted for Huntsman. No, Huntsman level capabilities, but not flesh and bone. Not as vulnerable as humans are. He wanted to kind of like mass produce them, but it only works so rarely. Like Penny was kind of the exception, and there's a couple other androids later on, especially in RWBYond Generations, when you get into Penny's daughter Nickel that she literally builds, and the other androids from the Tomorrow People arc with like like Titan, uh, Lithium Bat and Ray. Get it because it's a play on words of lithium battery. His name is Lithium. Uh, and his last name is Baton Ray, and he's Lithium Baton Ray is an android specifically designed to take down a Maiden. He has anti-mating glyphs, which are a thing I invented for RWBYond to help level the playing field with, smart characters and maidens. And yeah. Have you ever played or heard of JPDE? You might want to spell it out because I'm not that acronym is not ringing any bells. Eskimo pizza rolls, which is it's not impossible. I literally just ate pizza rolls. I probably still just smell them on my own breath. Uh, anyway, I didn't do a whole lot with Team Sun. I gave them a few fights and I gave them semblances and stuff, but that's really about it. I played up. Uh, yeah, I gave them some things to do, but it was always like plot relevant. Like they're the ones who find a character named Ambrose Thurston and then have him help them track down like Necros Faust. Like Team Sun are actually the ones who bring down Necros Faust, not anyone else. It's like Team Sun, Raven, and this character named Ambrose Thurston, who basically has the same powers as Scar from Full Metal Alchemist, and a lot of history with a lot of different like older characters. I guess I could talk about Team Arany. Team Arany is my main OC team. I really just made them because making OC teams was like the cool thing to do back then. Um, Still streaming, right? Yeah, no drop frames. All right. Sorry, I just saw like okay, there it goes. Looked like my internet like dipped out. Uh, so the leader is August Gold. He's a bird faunus. He basically looks like the Rito from Wind Waker. He has a beak nose. Um, like the Rito do in Wind Waker. Um, and his whole thing is about like wanting to be the best, wanting to fly higher than any other huntsman, and striving for perfection. Uh, he ends up being a headmaster at Arbiter Academy, which is the fifth, Huntsman Academy I ended up creating at the end of RWBYond Veil. Uh, and then yeah, he's kind of a badass. He gets a lot of fights throughout RWBYond Veil especially, but he's one of those characters that like I'll bring in every once in a while just to remind my readers that like yes, August is still kicking around. Uh, Next you have Rio Azul, who I also kind of use in that same way. Like in the final arc of RWBYond Home, he goes toe to toe with a, one of the antagonists named Daruk. they get in a massive like lava sword versus water sword. Because Rio Azul, he's basically a waterbender. He's a waterbender and a swordsman. He's chill. He's really fun. He was a lot of fun. He mellowed out older when he got older, I guess, but 20 years will do that. Can't be like the young spry warrior all the time throughout your entire life. Next is Rubrum Snaps, who for a while was my YouTube avatar, because Kitty drew some neat fan art of Rubrum. That is actually how we kind of started talking. And he's the tech wizard of the group. He can MacGyver his way through any situation with just a couple screws, wires, and duct tape. And he has a flamethrower or a dust caster that looks like a flamethrower, and he's great. He's dweeby, nerdy, socially awkward, but a brilliant scientist and inventor. And I ended up shipping him with Penny because, of course, the guy who is all into machines would get all into a machine. Uh, and so, and rounding out the cast is Natalie Blanche, who I was always worried that I wasn't going to be utilizing her very often just because, character swelling, and that's kind of true. I mostly just relegated her to plot details of like, oh, I need someone who can teleport. Natalie. There you go. So she doesn't really do much beyond like teleporting characters in and out of missions and out of danger into into combos and stuff. But she's like one of the characters who like knows how to talk down to Rio and get him to knock off his shenanigans and knows how to get Rubrum to open up, and so she's kind of the mom of the team. There's a lot of characters. A lot of characters are just kind of like one-offs or just like concepts of characters I had and then like toyed around with for a little bit before discarding. And I did that with a lot of villains. There's not a lot of villains I would say are particularly like deep. I'm proud of what I do with Cinder. I'm proud of what I do with Raven, even though Raven's not a villain. She's actually like just straight up hero for basically her entire time in the story. But then you get characters like Toby, who is just kind of like nihilistically loyal to Salem and just like her henchman. And he doesn't want to be important. Like his whole identity is like, I am Salem's right hand man, and he doesn't really, graduate beyond that. Beyond that, and being kind of the rival for Jean to fight a couple times. Now, same thing with Boulder. Boulder was supposed to like round out that cast, be kind of like what Hazel ended up being in the canon series, but yeah, he does even less than Toby. Toby at least stuck around for a while. He was a major player in a couple different arcs, whereas Boulder basically just got the one fight with Taiyang and then was never relevant again. But group of villains I did like was Team Acacia or Akatsuki, depending on how I was feeling. It was AKAS, and the leader is Akagi, who I mentioned earlier as being one of Ruby's rivals. So, as much as from a critical standpoint in the canon series, I've been pretty down on the Maidens, I did a lot with them. And one of the things I did was the idea of Maiden hunters. People who know that the Maidens exist and really want their power for whatever reason. Akagi is one of them. She wants the Spring Maiden power. In order to do that, she has to kill Ruby. Now, why does she want the Spring Maiden powers? Because she wants to be independent from Toby. She wants to get out from under his thumb. She wants to get out of Salem's, gang, and have the strength to protect her little sister, Kurome, who forms the K of Team AKAS. And Kurome and Akagi, they definitely parallel Ruby and Yang. And they have fights with Ruby and Yang throughout. Well, Kurome has fights throughout, RWBYond Vale before going through like a face turn because Ruby's just that cool, guys. Akagi only gets the one big fight because her and Ruby nearly kill each other, or she nearly kills Ruby, and Ruby does kill her. And it's the first person Ruby has ever like directly killed is Akagi, and she didn't want to. Akagi kind of forced her hand. And then rounding out the team, we got Ao. It's the Japanese word for blue. And he's a shark faunus who is just really powerful and really. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that was my encoder acting up. Another villain, Edwin Glass. I basically just used him to deconstruct the characters and kind of philosophize on my views on them. And he's of course a villain who likes to trash talk and talk down to people. Not so good in the fight though. I didn't end up doing much with Adam other than just having him be a physical threat, and also kind of a doofus who keeps getting his ass kicked by people better than him. Oh, the other member of Team Acacia is Shiro. I didn't end up doing much with Shiro. He's just another villain. I did kind of explore him later on, and I had him come back in RWBYond Home for a two-parter, just because like I had an idea for an episode involving a terrorist who bombs buildings, and I was like, hey, I never like definitively killed Shiro, so let's just have it be him. And then let's bring Kurome in to help out the heroes in bringing him down, and use that to explore her character even more, because I actually like Kurome. Didn't really care much for Shiro. I kind of just tacked him in to keep a 4-man team. Necros Faust was another major villain. I've mentioned him a couple times. He's someone who's obsessed with the past. That's reflected in his semblance. He thinks that like the best of the best are in the past. He doesn't he doesn't put stock in the future. He thinks that the new generations of huntsmen that have come after him are a waste of space. He thinks his own generation was a waste of space. That like his generation and generations after will never live up to the glory of like these legendary warriors from everyone's past. And that's why his semblance is to bring those warriors back and fight. Which leads to some interesting moments where he's like screwing with, he screws with Jean's head by bringing Pyrrha back at one point. Been going for about an hour. Reminder to like, comment, and subscribe, and don't donate to the donate to the Streamlabs to support the stream. Make it easier for me to do this more often. Uh, and support me on Patreon. Donation of $10 or more will get you the ability to tell me what to do for one video. It could be anything. You could be like, oh, here's $10. I want you to do a video on Sword Art Online, and I would do it. You could, tell me to do a video on a show I've never watched. Like, drop me $10 and be like, what's your thoughts on BoJack Horseman? And I'll be like, okay, let me watch BoJack Horseman to make you earn the earn the $10 that you're giving me. I've never seen BoJack Horseman. A lot of people told me to. And if you want me to get if you want to get me to watch a show I haven't watched and aren't planning on watching in the immediate future, a good way to do that is to donate $10 to my Patreon. Let's see, what's next? Just checking something real quick. Okay. Just making sure I wasn't like missing any notifications from anyone. I guess I can move on to Salem and kind of talk about a little bit of what I did with her in RWBYond Veil. Salem has a lot of the same things going on as Cinder, except she never got her redemption the way Cinder did. She kind of clung fast to like her desire for power. She wanted to become like the god of the world by assembling like all the Maiden powers, all the Grimoire powers, all these other like special genetic powers, and becoming the primordial and then reshaping the world as she sees fit. And she is foiled mostly because Ruby has such an unbreaking spirit that she resists Salem's attempts to steal her power, and also that the power she does accumulate is too much for her to control, and she ends up kind of like collapsing on herself at the end. So if you can't tell, I was taking a lot of inspiration from Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood in particular. Like basically, the final fight with Salem and RWBYond Veil is very similar to the fight with Father at the end of Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. And they're vacuuming upstairs because, of course, they are. Always when I'm streaming, never when I'm like doing anything else. Uh, yeah. So that takes us through RWBYond Veil. RWBYond War had a lot fewer villains. I brought Toby back. I brought Adam back. I brought Adam back basically just to kill him, and incite Blake's future characterizations as a deadbeat mom. Levi is the main villain in RWBYond War and one of the main villains in RWBYond Generations. He kind of serves as the more physical threat, particularly for Ruby. Like, the main villain of RWBYond Generations is a guy named Avis Braun, and Avis Braun is not really a combatant. He's more of he's an alchemist by trade. He's more like a smart like mage type character. Even at his absolute strongest, he was never like as strong as Ruby. Like when push comes to shove and it's the final battle, Team Ruby like kind of kicks his ass, like no problem. Like he doesn't even land a blow on them. They're just like bouncing around, just completely annihilate him at the end of RWBYond Generations. Levi is the real physical threat in the Cypher organization. He's the Darth Vader. he's the one who can go toe to toe with Ruby. He's the one who can go, who can equal her and match her in terms of power and abilities. Says YouTube is not receiving enough video to maintain smooth streaming. Buffering. Yeah, I don't really care about buffering, especially since this is basically audio only, since I'm not on camera anymore. Which kind of sucks because I'm wearing my Blues hat and I want to support the team. Because the Blues are in the Stanley Cup Finals. We had our first ever Stanley Cup Final win last night. That was exciting. It's been 50 years. We've been a team for 50 years, and most of those years we at least make it to the playoffs. This is the fourth time we've been in the Stanley Cup Finals, and the first time we've actually managed to edge out a victory in the Stanley Cup Finals. It's gonna be a long 7 games. It's gonna go 7 games. I could feel it. It's the Blues and the Bruins are gonna go 7 games, and it's gonna be intense. Like, I'm not gonna be able to poop all day on that game 7, and my ass is just gonna be clenched that hard. Now that we're done with that bit of imagery, the future generation. One of the impressive things I think in terms of like just the scale I put RWBYond at is that by the end, Ruby is a grandmother. She has several grandkids at the end of RWBYond Home. When she started off the story, she was only like 15, 16 years old. And just that's just how much time has passed. Like, she doesn't even become like a particularly young mother, and neither do any of her kids. But just so long. It is just such a long story. It takes over such a long span of time. So I also did a lot of world building stuff that I'm not going to get into because I would need much more of a script if I was going to do that. I'm just kind of freeballing it. I also don't want to go for too much longer. If I had some gameplay or something to occupy you guys, I would totally be down for like going 4 hours or something, but my voice can't take more than like an hour and a half or 2 hours, so stream's probably only going to go for another half an hour. So I guess I'll just go person to person with their kids. RWBYond have 5 kids. The first one is Citrain, who is a lot more like Yang in personality. That's kind of how I went with it. She's kind of Yang with Ruby's selfless tendencies, and also a bit of a vengeance streak that I didn't ever tap into. Like, there's just a lot of times where like someone she loves or cares about will get hurt, and she just goes on a rage, similar to Yang, I guess, because Yang does that too. Then you got Prim. Prim and Glade. Prim and Glade are twins. For a long time they were equal in power, and then Prim just started like passing them up for reasons, plot juice. And where Citrine inherited Ruby's semblance, Prim and Glade inherited Jean's, which in RWBYond the arc semblance is herd-like constructs. They're basically lanterns from DC. Not as crazy as the Green Lanterns are in DC. They're not gonna like clear an entire universe in a matter of minutes. Or punch holes in reality, or survive, taking retcons to the face. And then I just got asked two decent questions. And it's kind of derailing my train of thought right now. So I'll finish up RWBYond's kids. Glade is more serious. He's serious, grounded, level-headed. He's the smart one. He's the responsible one of the five kids. And Prim is, kind of like Yang in that she is outgoing and, buoyant. She's kind of a partier, like they kind of tried portraying Yang as in the yellow trailer. But she's also kind of bipolar with her depression, because she gets a lot of responsibilities thrust upon her that she didn't want, and she has to deal with that like for the entirety of her story, really. And it causes like a lot of anxiety and stuff in her. Uh, and then you got Argent, who I wanted to make kind of autistic. Like he's socially inept in some ways. Um, yeah, he has emotional disabilities. He has tunnel vision, and he has a semblance that is not like either of his parents. He actually has a semblance that's similar to the original Silver-Eyed Warrior in the RWBYond lore, Abraham of Argent Way. Uh, which is why he's the only. Well, Glade isn't the leader of his team either. Prim is. Because Prim and Glade are on the same team. But Argent is not the leader of his team either. Then you got Gelb. Gelb is just a kid. Story doesn't go far enough to see like him become a warrior or anything, because he's only like 8 or 9, 12, I guess, but in chapter 100, because the 4-year time skip I did. So yeah, Gelb is just too young to really be relevant in any of that. So Kieran asked what I think of the next death battle matchup, which is Weiss versus Mitsuru. I don't know anything about Mitsuru. I don't like Persona. I've played one of the Persona games and hated it. Never beat it. Never didn't get very far in it. There's just Persona is like a checklist of everything I don't want a game to be. Hipster, ironic, tongue-in-cheek, fourth wall breaking, a JRPG with turn-based combat, high school drama BS. It's just, yeah, Persona is not for me. So I'm pulling for Weiss. Just because I actually like her. I do hope that Weiss kind of loses, because then I'll be able to do the fuck you, I was right, because everyone says that, Screw Attack is overly biased for Rooster Teeth because of Yang versus Tifa, even though the math actually works out, Yang would actually win that fight. Don't at me. Awful writing beats awful gameplay in a death battle every single time. All the freaking controversies are shooting up again because a bunch of Ben 10 fanboys don't understand that Green Lantern is even more broken than Superman, and so we're getting all the death battle arguments again about like, oh, but what about this, what about that, and it's like, yeah, so Green Lantern flew across an entire universe in like 5 minutes. That is canon. That happened. Ben 10 has nothing on that. Ben 10 has nothing on taking a retcon to the face. Ben 10's been beaten before, like even at the height of his power. Like people have gotten the drop on him and stuff. Green Lantern, fully focused and driven, like nothing has beaten him. He's taken on Superman. He's taken on like Shazam. He's taken on Darkseid. He's taken on He took in the Infinite Crisis. Superboy Prime punches reality so hard that it causes retcons, and Green Lantern took a punch from him directly to the face. Ben 10 has nothing on that. Not even with Alien X. I do understand, like, Alien X does stand a good chance against Green Lantern, but that's only just. Like, there's still things that Alien X has been beaten before. No, the Celestial Sapiens, they were beaten in the context of Ben 10. There is no beating a fully trained Green Lantern. No one has done it. No one except, like, other lanterns and forces capable of collapsing the multiverse. Like, those are the only things that can stand a chance against a Green Lantern. Like, the only other, superhero I can think of that is on Green Lantern's level is Silver Surfer. And that's because the power cosmic is just as broken as the Green Lantern ring. Flying, like, just, from one end of the universe to the other in a matter of, Silver Surfer's done that. Just tanking planet reality busting grenades and stuff like this. That's just a level Ben 10 was not on. It was a completely one-sided match. Everyone can complain all they want about, like, oh, but what about this alien? What about that alien? And I'm just like, Green Lantern's still broken, dudes. Now, I have heard some things about Mitsuru that makes me think, like, yes, she outclasses Weiss, and she probably will, because here's another thing about all the people who try to debunk Death Battle: they don't actually do the math or research themselves. Like, I'm going to use a specific example. I don't know who the YouTuber is, but he tried debunking the Goku versus Superman fight, and his entire argument was predicated on a typo. When they were showing, like, Goku's strength multipliers and stuff, they forgot a 0 on the Super Saiyan 2 multiplier, and they used that as evidence of them not doing the math right. When, if you actually do the math yourself, you take that base and put it through all the multipliers, the result is still the same. It was literally just a typo. That was their whole argument. And it gets debunked if you actually do the math. So yeah, I just, if you want to debate death battles, if you want to do honest debates of death battle, either do the research yourself, read all the comic books that they do, take it from both sides, don't just cherry pick, examples of Ben 10 episodes where you think he outclasses Green Lantern. Actually do both sides like they do. Do the research, read all the comics, play the video games, watch the movies, whatever, watch the show, or just take their word for it. There's been death battle results that I'm not, fond of. Like, I don't like when they used to use Super Smash Brothers stuff for like, I think they used it for Wario. They used, like, Smash Brothers stats. And same thing with, like, Yoshi versus whatever Killer Instinct character he was fighting in his death battle. They used, like, Smash Brothers feats, which just isn't right. Some other ones. With Toph, which I get that Toph versus Gaara is a close fight. Regardless, I've done, the research myself. I've read and watched Naruto pretty extensively. I've, watched Avatar: The Last Airbender pretty extensively. That is actually a really close fight. I wish they would have addressed the speed difference, because Toph is not as fast as Gaara. I think Gaara should have won. Because they basically just, they use, like, the raw strength and the versatility of combat. Toph is a much more diverse fighter. Toph just has a lot more up her arsenal than Gaara does. And that's why they gave her the win. I don't think that's right, because I don't think Toph can actually keep up with Gaara's stand on a physical standpoint. So I think Gaara should have possibly won. Maybe they did consider that and they just didn't address it. like maybe they did do the math on like Toph's reflexes. Like maybe they did the math on Toph's reflexes and speed in certain episodes or whatever. And they were like, no, she's not. You know, she's not faster than Rock Lee. She's not faster than Madara. Whatever the case may be. Um, and that's why they still gave her the win. But I feel like that's something they should have addressed in the death battle itself. Which I get that. I get that. I get that. You know, they don't want these death battles to be hours long. Like with Green Lantern, they could have went hours and hours explaining all his feats and everything he's done. Um, and the result would have still been the same. It would have, you know, quelled some of the people that call hacks. Uh, but not all. So I don't think it would, I don't think it's worth making, you know, these death battles hours long just to cover everything when people are still going to complain about it. Like, from my point, my question is, what do they have to gain from bias? Like, I'm even going to use, you know, this upcoming battle with Weiss versus Mitsuru. You know, if they, you know, contrive ways for Weiss to win, they don't actually gain anything. That's not, you know, an adequate promotion for Rooster Teeth. It's not an adequate promotion for RTX, like some people are saying. The fact that she's Ruby is bigger than Death Battle. Like Death Battle is not doing Ruby any favors, really. It didn't do Yang any favors. It didn't do Volume 3 any favors. I mean, sure, like some people who there were some people who watched Death Battle and got into Ruby because of the Yang versus Tifa fight, but that didn't really do anything marketing wise. Um, and so I don't think I think it's really dumb to try to assume, you know, that uh, with when they use, you know, RTX characters. Now, like what was it? Carolina versus Meta. That was a promotion. That was a promotion. That was season 14. They want to get Death Battle or whatever. Uh, and Professor Chaos just brought up a good point. Uh, sorry, it's just I've been arguing with people all day about like how Green Lantern did actually deserve the win, and people just won't shut up about it. Like, I'm so tired. It's tiring because the people won't do the research themselves. They won't pick up a Green Lantern comic and see that he regularly like punches black holes in the face and stuff. Uh, so Professor Chaos asked, "What's your favorite death battle?" Goku versus Superman #1. Uh, I don't like Goku versus Superman #2 because I found it very, very unnecessary. It was definitely used to appease the people like that. In hindsight, we're like, oh, but what about Super Saiyan God and Super Saiyan Blue? Like, that doesn't change anything. Did you not like see the first death battle and see like how insane Superman is? Uh, uh See, Blade Charge like that would be a good reason to drop Death Battle is if they started doing that, but they haven't, or they're not doing that anymore. They again like they did that early on, like they did that with Yoshi. I know, and I think of like recent ones that they did that with. Maybe Carnage. I didn't end up watching Lucy versus Carnage because I hate both of those characters. Uh, da, 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 da. but with Superman, they specifically said up front in that first video that they're only using post-crisis comic book Superman. Uh, that they used the Superman who did those years of training with Mongol, to unlock like all of his potential and basically become God. Like they didn't even use Superman 1,000,000. They didn't use Superman 1,000,000. They didn't like teleport him to a blue star to increase his metabolism. They just used. They didn't use pre-crisis Superman who would sneeze a galaxy away or shapeshift or just pull random powers out of his butt. They only used post-crisis comic book Superman. And yes, All-Star Superman is in that continuity, guys. Even though they didn't actually use any of his feats, they only used the movie to demonstrate the feat. Namely the binge press that Superman did. That was like however many quintillion tons. Like he's done that plenty of times in the comic books. They only used that part from the All-Star Superman movie to demonstrate that. Like people just don't understand that Death Battle is a show, and so it's it adheres to certain production decisions. They have to animate it. They couldn't pull out every single alien Ben 10 has ever used because that's just too much work for the animators. It's not worth it, especially when none of them stand a chance against Green Lantern. I was actually having this discussion just a little while ago. There are some Dragon Ball characters that I think would totally annihilate Superman. Because there are a lot of Dragon Ball characters who use actual magic, like Majin Buu. Majin Buu would straight up turn Superman into a cookie and eat him. Like, there's nothing Superman can do to resist that. Superman would have an easier time resisting, like, the destruction of the multiverse than he would fighting Majin Buu's candy bean. Same thing with Mystic Gohan. I think I'm not sure how. It's never really explained how Mystic Gohan works. But Mystic Gohan, if it is actual magic that he surrounds himself in, he would beat Superman no problem. Even though he's actually kind of a low tier character in the grand scheme of things. Same thing with some of the older Dragon Ball villains, like what the fuck is her name? Bobby, the witch that like raises the dead or whatever. She would be able to, I don't think she'd be able to beat Superman, but she'd be able to do a lot more damage than Goku ever would. Anyway, I'm putting a pin in the Death Battle conversation. I just do the research yourself. God, I'm going for an hour and 20 minutes. Okay, Nora and Ren, they have... I'm jumping right back into it, no segue. Where we're going, we don't need segues. Going back to the RWBYond, Generations cast. Weiss has 2 kids. Ice is the main one. I ended up having her ship with Citrine, which is reminder that's RWBYond's oldest kid. And I did a lot with her what I would have done with Weiss had I had more of a plan for RWBYond Vale with Weiss. So a lot of the family anxieties and stuff I ended up doing that with Ice instead of Weiss. And then the other one I think was Nicholas, and he's just a kid. He doesn't fight. He doesn't even learn how to fight. He just takes over the company when Weiss retires. Yeah, Blade Charge. This whole stream is supposed to be about me reflecting on the last 3 years of my life working on RWBYond, which is my fanfiction series, but then it turned into a Death Battle rant around the time that you came in. Yeah, that's why it's called RWBYond a Post-Mortem. RWBYond is my fanfic, and it's over, and it's done and dead, and I'm not working on it ever again. Uh, so back to the kids. Ren and Nora have 4 kids. Uh, Nephrite is basically just female Ren. Shinzi is basically just male Nora, but then he also kind of gets a vengeance streak later on because he loses a lot. Uh, he loses a lot of people that he cares about a lot and gets banged up a lot. And because he's kind of a hand-to-hand fighter, I was able to do some more like creative things with his powers than I was with, say, than I was with Nora. A lot of like what I would have done with Nora, I ended up doing with him instead. Uh, then you also had Lan Mei and Rosaline, who don't do a whole lot because they're just young. Yeah. Where we're going, we don't need segues. So someone quote that in like the tundra. If any of you are in the tundra, quote that. Where we're going, we don't need segues. Uh, I'll probably quote it in the real Genlock hours. Is it still called real Genlock hours? I know High Power was talking about changing the name of the Discord server, as he does periodically. Ooh, someone tagged me in something. Fox Village. Okay. Yeah, so-called real Genlock hours. Uh, Nova is the only child of Blake and Son, and she's my favorite. I talked about her a lot in the last Writers Workshop stream, so if y'all want to look for that, it was a lot more informative and useful, probably. It wasn't just me ranting about Death Battle for like 15-20 minutes. Kitty, if I had the power to change the name of the server, I would have changed it to Real Quintuplet Hours weeks ago. But only High Powered has that power. That is how he is the Discord dad. Let's see. I guess so I'm kind of wanting to wrap this up now. I'm edging on an hour and a half. Projects, future projects. Well, before I get into future projects, if you want to read RWBYond, read it. It's really long, I know, but it's not getting any longer. That's a benefit. Other fanfiction projects I have in mind. I've been talking to Raymond McNeil about me doing a Little Witch Academia fic. Uh, um, yeah, Little Witch Academia fic. I'm going to do some quintessential quintuplets fanfics. I just need to know exactly what I'm going to do and what order I'm going to do them in. I'm also planning Just Act Manly, or planning on finishing Just Act Manly. I was doing that in between the last 2 arcs of RWBYond Home, and then I got like really involved in RWBYond Home and some other projects and neglected it so I could finish up RWBYond Home first. Um, uh, yeah, that's about it for fanfiction projects. Uh, Blade Charge. If you want to see the anime I'm into and the one Dashi is into, a good place to start is High School DxD, especially if you want to get into the types of anime that Dashi is into. So that's like her bread and butter right there. Bread and butter her muffins. Um, if you follow me on Twitter, I talk about anime I like all the time. Konosuba is first one that pops in my mind because Team Frostbite is reacting to season 2 of Konosuba, and so I've been like rewatching that as they're releasing the reactions, keeping up with that. Okay, future project title or series title: Night Watch. That's my next big project I'm working on. The first story will be called Night Watch: The Hellfire Brats. It is a pulp, a pulp supernatural noir-ish, detective story involving basically wizards. And if you read a shadow pulp, what I'm going for is basically the shadow, but the agents have superpowers too. That's kind of the basis. I'm not going to talk, a whole lot of details. Maybe I will at a later time when I have a lot more to show for it. I have a lot of ideas. If you're on the Discord, I talk about it all the time. I talk about it in the Shitty Fix channel. I've mentioned it a lot of times on the Tundra. So like if you get in a conversation with me on Discord, voice chat, I'm on voice chat all the time across the Discords. I'm free to talk about like ideas that I have, but until I get more of a thing, I'm not going to talk about it in depth. I am going to talk about like a lot of serious themes, a lot of socio-political themes on religion, gang life, inner city life, police brutality, stuff like that. The role that the media plays in our lives. Those are all going to be like aspects of the world I'm building with Night Watch, along with the superpowered mage duels and stuff like that. And other future project, I've mentioned this before. I mentioned this on the other Writers Workshop stream a year ago. It's called Lightbringers. Lightbringers, you could call it an isekai, I guess, because the idea I have for is, guy in the real world winds up in a fantasy world with a magic flashlight and goes on an adventure there. But I'm taking a lot more inspiration from books like Haroun and the Sea of Stories, Wizard of Oz, and Alice in Wonderland. Not, your isekai power fantasies like Sword Art Online, Overlord, or Shield Hero. So that about wraps it up for this stream. I've been going for an hour and a half. Once again, if you like this video, like, comment, and subscribe. I want to do streams more often, but I really, really need a new computer first. Like, this computer is barely, like, holding itself together doing what I'm doing right now. Like, it cannot stream games anymore. It's just crapping out on me. I've had it for over 3 years now. And so, support me on Patreon. Professor K has asked what are some of my favorite RWBY fanfics. I don't read a lot of fanfics. Anything by The Last Sonata. I'm trying to remember the titles. No, I can check real quick. Stories. The story called Repentance by The Last Sonata. That's probably my favorite. I've also liked a lot of Lancaster stuff. A lot of Summer Rose stuff. But Repentance is the one that like I really, really, really enjoyed. If you don't know, it's about a it's very Raven focused. I also think Repentance was the last in a trilogy. yeah, there's innocence, vengeance, and repentance. Innocence is that, or oh god, which one was? I think vengeance was my favorite of the three. Uh, repentance was probably my least favorite because it was the ending and it had that last installment of the trilogy syndrome where it just wasn't as good as the last two. Didn't tie up everything in a satisfactory way. Another one of my favorites is called An Affair or Something by the College Fool. That is actually what got me into RWBY fan fictions for a little bit. Other than that, I really don't read fan fictions. It's just not my scene. I write. I don't have time to read. Uh, it takes me forever to actually read something. It took me like 9 months to catch up with One Piece when I started reading that. Uh, and now I'm rereading One Piece because I'm planning on doing those videos on it. Future videos. The Alabasta Saga review will come after my quintuplet honest looks, which there's going to be 6 of them. The first one is already up. Watch it. It's an honest look at Ichika. Next is Nino, then it'll be Miku, Yotsuba, Itsuki, and then finally to tie it all together, Furudoro. And then after that, I will do the Alabasta Saga One Piece video, and then I will do an honest look at Crow, which has been my most demanded video since Volume 6 ended. And I'll have that before Volume 7 starts, I promise. Anyway, I'm gonna go. I can hear them cleaning upstairs now. So thank you all for joining me and listening to me just ramble for an hour and a half, and a lot of that being Death Battle and not what I originally set out to do. Thanks for distracting me, guys, and I'll catch you next time.